The stars had always been cold and silent, but tonight they felt colder than ever. Admiral Jack stood alone on the observation deck of the starship Resolute, his hands clasped behind his back as he stared into the endless darkness of space. He was 63 years old, and he had spent 40 of those years serving in the United Earth Navy. He had seen battles, lost friends, and watched humanity struggle to find its place among the stars. But nothing had prepared him for the message he had received 3 hours ago. New Carthage was gone, 17 million people dead. The Empire had attacked without warning. Their warships had appeared in orbit around the colony world just after midnight local time. The colonists had no military ships, no defense platforms, nothing but a small security force meant to handle minor disputes. They had not come to conquer. They had come to kill. Their plasma bombardment had lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the cities were ash, the forests were fire, and every man, woman, and child on the planet was dead. Closed his eyes and tried to breathe. He could see their faces in his mind, families eating dinner, children playing in parks, young couples walking under alien moons, dreaming of futures that would never come, all of them gone in a single night of fire. The door behind him slid open, and Commander Lisa Trent stepped onto the observation deck. She was younger than by 20 years, with sharp eyes and a calm voice that had steadied many soldiers in times of crisis. But even she looked shaken now. Her face was pale, and her hands trembled slightly as she walked to stand beside him. "The Council has responded," she said quietly. "They will not intervene." Did not turn to look at her. What was their reason? They said humanity lacks strategic importance. They said they acted within their sovereign rights. They said we should pursue diplomatic solutions. Trent's voice cracked with barely contained anger. 17 million dead, and they want us to talk. Finally turned. His eyes were hard, and something had changed in his expression. The patient diplomat who had spent decades playing by galactic rules was gone. In his place stood something older and more dangerous. "How long have we been part of the Galactic Confederation?" he asked. 212 years, sir. "And in all that time, how many times have we asked for help? How many times have we begged for fair treatment, for equal trade rights, for protection under galactic law?" Trent looked down, too many times to count. "And how many times did they help us?" "Never." Nodded slowly. He walked to the communication console and entered his personal authorization code. The screen flickered to life, showing the seal of the United Earth government. "What are you doing, sir?" Trent asked. "Something we should have done a long time ago." Typed a single phrase into the console, "Activate Protocol Omega." He pressed send and watched the message disappear into the void. On Earth, the message arrived at the office of President Dawson just as the sun was setting over the Atlantic Ocean. She read it twice, then called an emergency meeting of the Global Defense Council. Within 2 hours, every major leader on the planet was gathered in a secure bunker beneath the Alps. The debate was short. For 2 centuries, humanity had tried to be good citizens of the galaxy. They had followed rules that others ignored. They had accepted insults and restrictions that no other species would tolerate. They had watched as elder races grew fat and comfortable while humans struggled for every scrap of territory and respect. No more. President Dawson stood before the council and spoke the words that would change history. "The Empire has committed an act of genocide against our people. The Galactic Confederation has abandoned us. From this moment forward, humanity is at war. Not just but with any civilization that threatens our survival. We will no longer beg. We will no longer wait. We will show the galaxy what happens when you push humanity too far." The declaration was broadcast across every human colony, every ship, every outpost in known space. And then it was sent to the Galactic Council itself. The reaction was immediate. High Arbiter of the Collective laughed when he heard the news. They were an ancient species, over 1 million years old. They had seen countless young races rise and fall. Humanity, to them, was nothing but a brief flicker in cosmic history. "Let them rage," said to his advisors. "They will burn themselves out within a year. Then we will divide their worlds among the elder races as we always planned." But not everyone shared his confidence. In the shadows of the council chambers, other species watched and worried. A race of traders who had dealt with humans for generations sent urgent warnings to a warrior species who respected strength above all else began quietly repositioning their fleets. And in the depths of the galactic network, ancient monitoring systems that had not activated in 10,000 years suddenly came to life. These systems had been built long ago by species now forgotten, designed to detect existential threats to galactic civilization. They had remained silent through countless wars and disasters. Now they were screaming. Back on the Resolute, Commander Trent stood beside Admiral as reports flooded in from across human space. Factories were converting to military production. Civilian ships were being armed. Millions of volunteers were signing up for service. The entire species was mobilizing with a speed and unity that comprehension. "Sir," Trent said softly, "do you think we can actually win this?" Looked at her with eyes that held no doubt. 200 years ago, when we first met the Galactic Confederation, they asked us about our history. They wanted to know about our greatest achievements. Do you know what scared them the most? Trent shook her head. It was not our weapons or our technology. It was our wars. They could not understand how a species could fight itself so brutally for so long and still survive. They called us mad, broken, dangerous, turned back to the stars. They were right, but they made one mistake. They thought our madness was a weakness. They never considered what would happen if we turned it outward. Across the galaxy, ancient species who had ruled the stars for millions of years felt something they had not experienced in eons. It was faint at first, just a whisper in the back of their minds. But as the hours passed, it grew stronger. It was fear. Humanity had declared war, and the galaxy would never be the same. 3 weeks after humanity declared war, the Galactic Council held an emergency session on the great station called the Nexus. Representatives from over 400 species filled the massive chamber, their voices rising in heated debate. At the center of it all stood High Arbiter, his ancient body wrapped in ceremonial robes as he addressed the assembly. "There is no cause for alarm," said, his voice echoing through the hall. "Humanity is a young species with limited resources and primitive technology. They have perhaps 300 warships. The Empire alone commands over 10,000. This war will be over before it begins." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. The elder races nodded their heads and relaxed in their seats. They had seen this before. Young species sometimes lashed out when they felt wronged. It never lasted long. But in the far corner of the chamber, Ambassador Cole sat in silence. He was tall and lean, with gray hair and calm brown eyes that revealed nothing of his thoughts. He had served as Earth's representative for 15 years, enduring insults and dismissals with quiet patience. Today, however, something was different. There was a small smile on his lips. A trader named leaned toward him and whispered, "Ambassador, your people are making a terrible mistake. They will crush your fleet within days. You should surrender now and beg for mercy." Cole turned to look at the alien. "Tell me, in all your dealings with humanity, have you ever known us to beg?" Before could respond, High Arbiter called for order. "We will now hear from the human representative. Perhaps he wishes to apologize for his species' rash behavior." Cole stood slowly and walked to the center of the chamber. Every eye was upon him. Some looked at him with pity, others with contempt. A few looked nervous. "Honored members of the Galactic Council," Cole began, his voice clear and steady. "You have called humanity young. You have called us primitive. You have spent 2 centuries treating us as children who should be grateful for whatever scraps you throw our way." He paused and looked around the room. "You were wrong." Laughed, strong words from a species that cannot even defend its own colonies. New Carthage had no defenses because we were told we did not need them. We were told the Confederation would protect us. We trusted you." Cole's voice hardened. "That trust cost us 17 million lives. It was a mistake we will not make again." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device. "For 200 years, humanity has hidden something from you. While your species grew comfortable and complacent, we prepared. We built research stations in the dark spaces between stars where no one would find them. We developed technologies you cannot imagine. We trained soldiers in secret, millions of them, waiting for the day when we would need them." Cole pressed a button on the device. The main screen in the chamber flickered, then displayed a series of images. Massive shipyards hidden inside hollowed asteroids, weapons platforms orbiting dead stars, fleets of warships that no one had ever seen. The chamber fell silent. "You counted 300 ships in our public fleet," Cole continued. "Our actual fleet numbers over 12,000, and they are not like your ships. They are faster, stronger, and armed with weapons your scientists have not even dreamed of." On Earth, General was overseeing the largest military mobilization in human history. She stood in the command center beneath the Rocky Mountains, surrounded by screens showing activity from every human world. Factories that had produced consumer goods yesterday were now building missiles. Universities that had taught art and literature were now training combat engineers. Hospitals were preparing for mass casualties. But what truly amazed the watching alien observers was the speed. Other species took years to shift from peace to war. Humans did it in weeks. Every citizen, it seemed, had a role to play. Those who could not fight built weapons. Those who could not build grew food. Those who could not work gave blood. The entire species moved as one. "How is this possible?" whispered an observer to his colleague. "They have no central control. Their government is fragmented. They should be paralyzed by debate and disagreement." His colleague shook his head in disbelief. They were, until the attack. Now they are united by something stronger than government. They are united by rage. The first test of humanity's new strength came 31 days after the declaration of war. The Emperor, confident in his superiority, sent a fleet of 300 warships to destroy Earth and end the conflict quickly. The fleet was commanded by Admiral, a veteran of dozens of campaigns who had never known defeat. Expected to face a desperate defense by an outmatched enemy. Instead, he found Captain waiting for him at the edge of the solar system. Was 34 years old, with a reputation for tactical genius that bordered on madness. He had been court-martialed twice for disobeying orders and promoted 3 times for winning impossible victories. His squadron consisted of just 40 ships, barely a tenth of the force, but did not fight the way other commanders fought. As the fleet approached, they found their sensors blinded by strange interference. Their communications were jammed by signals that shifted frequency faster than their computers could track. And then, out of the darkness, came the asteroids. Had spent the previous week mining the outer solar system, attaching engines to massive rocks and programming them to accelerate toward specific coordinates. They never saw them coming. 60 ships were destroyed in the first volley, crushed by mountains of stone moving at incredible speed. Before could recover, attacked. His ships dove into the formation, weaving between enemy vessels with terrifying precision. When a human ship was damaged beyond repair, its crew did not abandon it. They aimed it at the nearest enemy and accelerated to maximum speed. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, not a single ship remained. Admiral's flagship was the last to fall, rammed by a burning human cruiser whose captain laughed as she died. Lost 22 of his 40 ships, but he had destroyed a force 7 times his size. Across the galaxy, the news spread like fire. The Armada, pride of one of the oldest empires in known space, had been annihilated by a handful of human ships. Military analysts from 100 species watched the battle recordings in stunned disbelief. They had never seen tactics like this. Humans did not fight with honor or follow predictable patterns. They used tricks and traps and sacrificed themselves without hesitation. In the Galactic Council chamber, Ambassador Cole received the news with a slight nod. He turned to face the assembly, where fear had replaced contempt on countless alien faces. "This was just the beginning," he said quietly. "You wanted to know what humanity is capable of. Now you are starting to learn. And I promise you this, before this war is over, you will understand exactly why the universe should fear us." The elder races looked at each other in growing horror. For 1,000,000 years, they had ruled the galaxy. They had never imagined that their reign could be challenged by creatures they had dismissed as primitives. They were beginning to understand their mistake, but it was far too late. The destruction of Admiral's fleet sent shockwaves through the galaxy. For the first time in living memory, an elder race had been humiliated by a species they considered inferior. The Emperor raged in his palace, demanding explanations and executions. But no amount of anger could change what had happened. Humanity was no longer a joke. Humanity was a threat. Admiral Jack stood on the bridge of the Resolute as his fleet pushed deeper into territory. They had been advancing for 3 months now, taking system after system with methodical precision. The enemy fought hard, but they could not match human determination. Every time the thought they had found a pattern in human tactics, the humans changed. Every time they prepared a trap, the humans found a way around it. Commander Lisa Trent approached with a data pad in her hand. Her face was troubled. "Sir, Lieutenant Brooks has finished his analysis. You need to see this." Took the pad and scrolled through the information. His expression grew darker with each line. "Are you certain about this?" Brooks triple-checked everything. "The evidence is solid." Called a meeting of his senior officers in the main conference room. Lieutenant Brooks, a young intelligence officer with sharp features and nervous energy, stood before a large display screen and began his presentation. "3 weeks ago, we captured a communications hub. I spent the past month decrypting their classified transmissions." Brooks took a deep breath. The massacre at New Carthage was not a random act of aggression. It was ordered by the inner circle of the Galactic Council. Silence fell over the room. Officers exchanged horrified glances. "The 5 elder species who secretly control the Confederation have been watching humanity for decades," Brooks continued. "They saw us growing stronger, expanding faster than they expected. They decided we needed to be stopped before we became a real power. The Emperor did not want to attack New Carthage. He was given an ultimatum by the Council. Either he would destroy the colony or they would destroy his empire." Captain slammed his fist on the table. "Those cowards, they hid behind another species to do their dirty work." "It gets worse," Brooks said. "New Carthage was just the first step. If we had accepted the massacre and remained passive, they planned to engineer more incidents. They wanted to slowly exterminate us while maintaining the appearance of neutrality." Stood and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. His voice was quiet but filled with cold fury. "So the council that was supposed to protect all species has been working to destroy us from the beginning. Everything they told us about equality and cooperation was a lie." "Yes, sir," Brooks confirmed. "The Galactic Confederation was never meant to include us. We were only allowed to join so they could watch us more closely and control our development." Commander Trent spoke up. "Sir, this changes everything. We are not just fighting we are fighting the entire galactic power structure." Turned to face his officers. "Then we will tear that structure down, but we will not become monsters in the process." He looked at each face in the room. "We will defeat our enemies, but we will not commit genocide. We will not slaughter civilians. We will show the galaxy that humanity is better than the creatures who tried to destroy us." While the main fleet advanced on Prime, Lieutenant Maria Santos led ground forces to liberate the human colony of Helios IV. They had occupied the planet after the war began, taking the human population as hostages. Santos and her soldiers fought through the streets of the capital city, clearing building after building in brutal close combat. By the end of the second day, the garrison had surrendered. Santos stood in the main plaza, surrounded by freed human colonists who wept with joy. But her attention was drawn to a group of prisoners being guarded by her troops. They were wounded and afraid, expecting the same treatment they had given to humans. A young soldier approached Santos with his weapon raised. "Lieutenant, what do we do with them? Should we execute them?" Santos looked at the prisoners. She thought about New Carthage. She thought about the 17 million dead. For a moment, rage burned in her chest and part of her wanted to say yes. But then she remembered why she had joined the military. It was not to become a killer. It was to protect people. "No," she said firmly. "Set up a medical station, treat their wounds, feed them, guard them, but do not harm them." The soldier stared at her in disbelief. "But Lieutenant, after what they did." "What they did was evil, but we are not evil." Santos raised her voice so everyone could hear. "Spread the word to all units. Prisoners will be treated with dignity. Anyone who harms a prisoner will answer to me personally." Word of Santos's decision spread quickly. Within days, it reached military commanders across the war zone. They learned that surrender to humans did not mean death. It meant survival. The effect was remarkable. Soldiers who had been prepared to fight to the last breath began laying down their weapons. Entire units surrendered without firing a shot. Back at the Galactic Council, cracks were appearing in the Confederation. Species who had never liked the elder races began to question their leadership. They officially declared neutrality in the war, refusing to fight against humanity. They offered to mediate peace talks, though they were rejected by both sides. Dozens of smaller species sent secret messages to Ambassador Cole, offering trade agreements and diplomatic recognition. High Arbiter watched his carefully built coalition crumble around him. He called an emergency meeting of the Inner Circle, the 5 species who had secretly ruled the galaxy for. They gathered in a hidden chamber aboard the Nexus, their holographic forms shimmering in the darkness. "Humanity must be stopped," hissed. "They are destroying everything we built." "Perhaps we should negotiate," suggested the representative of a species known for their caution. "Negotiate?" His voice rose in fury. "They know about New Carthage. They know we gave the order. There can be no negotiation. Either we destroy them or they destroy us." The Inner Circle made their decision. They would combine their fleets into the largest armada the galaxy had ever seen. 30,000 ships from 5 species, carrying enough firepower to crack planets. They would crush humanity once and for all. But as they made their plans, they did not realize that Lieutenant Brooks had already infiltrated their communication networks. Every word they spoke, every order they gave, was recorded and transmitted to Admiral. The humans knew the attack was coming, and they were ready. Commander Trent reviewed the intelligence reports with growing concern. "Sir, even with our full strength, we cannot match 30,000 ships. The math simply does not work." Nodded slowly. "Then we will not try to match them. We will beat them some other way." "How?" Smiled for the first time in months. It was not a kind smile. By being human, they expect us to follow their rules, fight their way, think like they think. We will do none of those things. We will do what we have always done when faced with impossible odds. He turned to face the stars. "We will cheat." Across the galaxy, the greatest war in history was about to enter its final phase, and humanity was about to show the universe why they should never be underestimated. The war was now in its second year. What had begun as a punishment expedition against an upstart species had transformed into something far greater. The empire was crumbling. Their greatest fleets had been shattered. Their colonies were falling one by one, and worst of all, their allies were abandoning them. Admiral Jack led his fleet into the home system on a cold morning by Earth's calendar. 2,000 human warships emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, their weapons powered and ready. Before them lay Prime, the jewel of an empire that had ruled 1,000 worlds for 10,000 years. The Emperor watched from his palace as the human fleet approached. He was old now, his scales faded and his eyes dim. He had ruled for 3 centuries and had never known true fear until now. His advisors begged him to surrender, but pride would not allow it. He was the Emperor. He would not bow to primitives. "Activate the weapon," he commanded. Deep beneath the palace, engineers rushed to obey. For centuries, they had hidden their greatest secret, a device capable of destroying entire planets. It had been built long ago, during a war that everyone else had forgotten. Now it would be used one final time. The planet killer launched from a hidden base on the far side of Prime. It was not aimed at its fleet. It was aimed at Earth itself, traveling through a secret hyperspace corridor that no outsider knew existed. In less than 3 hours, humanity's would be nothing but dust. The Emperor smiled as he watched it disappear. Even if he lost everything else, humanity would lose their heart. Let them rule the ashes. But he had underestimated human intelligence. Lieutenant Brooks had discovered the secret corridor months ago. He had placed sensors along its length, watching and waiting. The moment the planet killer launched, Earth received warning. Captain Miles stood in the command center of the orbital defense station above Earth. She was 42 years old, a veteran of a dozen battles, and she had 17 minutes to save 8 billion people. Around her, officers shouted status reports and emergency protocols. Miles ignored them all. She needed to think. "Captain," said Engineer Palmer, a thin man with wild hair and desperate eyes, "the weapon is too large to intercept with missiles. Our main guns cannot penetrate its shields. We have nothing that can stop it." Miles stared at the tactical display. The planet killer was moving at incredible speed, a massive sphere of metal and death hurtling toward everything she loved. Standard weapons would not work. She needed something else. "What about the experimental gravity projector?" she asked. Palmer blinked. "It has never been tested at full power. The calculations suggest it could create a localized gravity well strong enough to bend space itself. But the power requirements are enormous. We would have to shut down everything else on the station." "Do it." Tony Reeves, the weapons specialist, began rerouting power from every system on the station. Lights went dark. Life support dropped to minimum. Every watt of energy flowed into the untested projector. 90 seconds to impact, a technician announced. Miles watched the countdown with steady eyes. Everything depended on the next few moments. If this worked, Earth would survive. If it failed, she would never know. She would be dead along with everyone else. 60 seconds. The gravity projector hummed to life. Palmer monitored the readings with trembling hands. "Power levels are critical. The projector is holding, but I do not know for how long." 30 seconds. Miles gripped the edge of her console. Fire. A beam of twisted space erupted from the station. It struck the path of the planet killer, creating a gravity well of impossible density. The weapon began to curve away from Earth, its trajectory bending like light around a star. Alarms screamed as the projector overloaded. Consoles exploded. Palmer was thrown across the room. 10 seconds. The planet killer veered sharply, missing Earth by less than 1,000 kilometers. It continued into deep space, where it detonated harmlessly against nothing but empty void. The explosion lit up the sky for a brief moment, then faded. Earth was safe. Miles collapsed into her chair, her body shaking with relief. Around her, officers cheered and embraced. Palmer picked himself up from the floor, bleeding from a cut on his forehead but grinning like a madman. "We did it," he whispered. "We actually did it." The news reached Prime within minutes. The Emperor's final gambit had failed. Fleets surrounded the planet, and there was nothing left to stop them. The once proud ruler of 1,000 worlds knelt before the human admiral and surrendered. But knew the war was not over. There had been a weapon, not the hand that wielded it. The true enemies were still out there. Ambassador Cole stood before the full Galactic Assembly and presented the evidence Brooks had gathered. Every secret transmission, every hidden order, every record of the conspiracy that had murdered 17 million innocent people. The broadcast reached every corner of civilized space. Trillions of beings watched as the truth was revealed. High Arbiter attempted to speak, but his voice was drowned out by shouts of anger and betrayal. Species who had trusted the elder races for now saw them for what they truly were. The Confederation, the great alliance that had maintained galactic peace for ages, was built on lies and murder. The Inner Circle conspired to exterminate humanity, Cole said, his voice cutting through the chaos. They used thee as a weapon and hid behind false neutrality. They have done this before to other species who threatened their power. Humanity will not be their last victim unless we stop them here and now. The chamber erupted into chaos. Representatives screamed accusations at the elder races. Old alliances shattered. New ones formed in moments. The pledged their support to humanity. The demanded justice. Dozens of species who had lived in fear of the elders for generations finally found their courage. And the other members of the Inner Circle fled the assembly. They retreated to the Citadel of Ages, an ancient fortress at the galaxy's core that had stood for 1,000,000 years. There they gathered their remaining loyal forces, determined to make a final stand. Admiral received word of their location and began planning the assault. The Citadel was defended by the combined fleets of the 5 elder species, perhaps 10,000 ships still loyal to the old order. It was protected by shields that could withstand planetary bombardment and weapons that could destroy stars. General spoke to via secure channel. We have won every battle so far, but this is different. The Citadel is nearly impregnable. Even if we win, we will lose thousands of ships and millions of lives. Looked at the tactical display showing the fortress. I know. That is why we are not going to fight the way they expect. Commander Trent looked at him with confusion. Sir, the elders have spent 1,000,000 years controlling this galaxy through fear. They expect us to attack with anger and hatred. They expect us to throw ourselves against their defenses until we break. Shook his head. We will not. We will show them something they have never seen. We will show them mercy. Trent stared at him. Mercy after everything they did. After everything they did, confirmed. Because that is what separates us from them. That is what will win this war. Not just victory, but something better. A future worth living in. The final battle was approaching, and humanity was about to prove that there was more than one way to conquer an empire. The Citadel of Ages hung at the center of the galaxy like a dark jewel surrounded by fire. It was the oldest structure in known space, built by species who had disappeared before most current civilizations learned to speak. For 1,000,000 years, it had been the secret throne of galactic power, the place where the true rulers of the universe made their decisions. Now it was a prison. 10,000 warships surrounded the Citadel, their weapons trained on the ancient fortress. The flags of 5 elder species flew from these vessels, the last defenders of an order that had ruled through fear and deception. Inside the Citadel itself, High Arbiter and the other members of the Inner Circle waited for the final assault. Admiral Jack studied the tactical display from the bridge of the Resolute. His fleet had gathered from every corner of human space, 2,000 ships carrying the hope and fury of their entire species. They were outnumbered 5-1, but that had never stopped humanity before. Commander Lisa Trent stood beside him. The fleet is ready, sir. We can begin the assault on your order. Did not give the order. Instead, he turned to the communications officer. Open a channel. Broadcast on all frequencies, including the ones the Citadel uses. Sir, the officer looked confused but obeyed. Stepped forward and spoke clearly. This message is for everyone defending the Citadel. I am Admiral Jack of the United Earth Navy. I know you are afraid. I know your leaders have told you that we are monsters who will show no mercy. I am here to tell you they are wrong." On the bridge of a battleship, Commander listened with growing uncertainty. He had served the inner circle his entire life. He had been taught that humanity was savage and dangerous, but he had also watched the recordings from the war. He had seen how humans treated their prisoners with kindness. He had heard stories of enemy wounded being saved by human doctors. Continued. "The war is over for those who wish it to end. Any ship that stands down will be allowed to leave peacefully. Any being who surrenders will be treated with dignity. We do not want to destroy you. We only want to remove the tyrants who have enslaved this galaxy for too long." Lies hissed from inside the citadel. "Do not listen to them. Attack now before they spread more poison." But the fleet did not move. Captains looked at each other across the void. They thought about their families, their crews, their futures. They thought about fighting and dying for leaders who had lied to them. The merchant vessel Wind of Fortune was the first to power down its weapons, then a cruiser, then a dozen more. Like a wave spreading across the ocean, ships began standing down. Their crews made their choice. Within an hour, half the fleet defending the citadel had surrendered. The rest broke formation and fled into deep space, abandoning their masters to face justice alone. Watched in disbelief as his power crumbled. He had ruled he had crushed rebellions and silenced dissent. He had believed himself untouchable. Now he stood alone in the great hall of the citadel, surrounded by the other members of the inner circle, watching their universe collapse. Human Marines boarded the station without resistance. Lieutenant Maria Santos, now promoted to colonel, led the team that captured the inner circle. She found them sitting in their ancient chairs, too proud to run but too broken to fight. "You have destroyed everything," said as soldiers bound his hands. "A million years of peace, of order, of civilization, and you have burned it all for petty revenge." Santos looked at him with steady eyes. "You killed 17 million of our people. You tried to exterminate our entire species, and you call our response petty." "We were protecting the galaxy from you," insisted. "We knew what you were, what you could become. We saw your history, your wars, your cruelty. We knew that if you were allowed to grow strong, you would destroy everything." "You were wrong." Santos stepped closer to the ancient tyrant. "We did not want to conquer the galaxy. We just wanted to live in peace. You could have left us alone. You could have treated us as equals. Instead, you chose murder. This is the result of your choice, not ours." The inner circle was brought before a tribunal composed of representatives from 100 species. General argued for execution. After everything they had done, death seemed like the only appropriate punishment. But Admiral spoke against it. "If we execute them, we become what they feared," he said. "We prove that they were right about us. Humanity is better than that. We must be better than that." The tribunal debated for 3 days. In the end, they reached a decision. The members of the inner circle would be exiled to a barren world at the edge of the galaxy. They would spend the rest of their lives in isolation, stripped of power and influence, watching as everything they built was remade by others. It was not a kind punishment. It was not a gentle one, but it was just. In the months that followed, a new order emerged from the ashes of the old. The Galactic Confederation was dissolved, and in its place rose the Galactic Union. Ambassador Cole was elected first speaker by unanimous vote. The principles of the new government were simple. No species would be treated as inferior, every voice would be heard, and never again would the strong be allowed to prey upon the weak without consequence. Humanity did not seek to rule the galaxy. They had never wanted that. They wanted only what they had always wanted, a place among the stars, a chance to grow and explore and build a future for their children. Now, at last, they had it. Captain, now promoted to Admiral, stood with Colonel Maria Santos at the memorial for New Carthage. It hung in orbit around Earth, a vast wall of stone and light bearing the names of 17 million dead. Families came here to remember. Soldiers came here to reflect. Leaders came here to remind themselves why they fought. They died because we were seen as weak, Santos said softly, reading the names that stretched into infinity. Shook his head. They died because others forgot what we are capable of when we are pushed too far. The galaxy will not forget again. Santos looked out at the stars. Do you think it was worth it? All the death, all the suffering. Did we make something better? I do not know, admitted. But I know we tried, and I know we will keep trying. That is what humans do. We make mistakes. We cause harm, but we also learn, we grow, we build. He placed his hand on the cold stone wall, feeling the weight of all those names. These people did not die for revenge. They died so that no one else would have to die the same way. Their sacrifice meant something. It changed the galaxy. Across the universe, a new age was beginning. Old enemies were becoming friends. Ancient wounds were slowly healing. The galaxy was learning to trust again, to hope again, to dream of a future where all species could thrive together. And at the center of it all stood humanity, no longer dismissed as primitives, no longer ignored or despised. They had earned their place among the stars not just through strength, but through wisdom, not just through fury, but through mercy. They had declared war against the galaxy, and in the end, they had won something far greater than victory. They had won the future,